name's Marie-Lockyer. I'm the CEO of Pi Funds and the co-chair of the Investments and KiwiSaver Committee for the FSC. This afternoon's session is entitled KiwiSaver at 2050. And again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I was thinking actually when the fire alarm went that a number of people would be leaving and popping off for the afternoon. So it's great that everyone came back and stayed for the afternoon session and probably for the drinks following this. While I was outside, I overheard a conversation which went something like, wouldn't it be great if we could create a 100-year plan for KiwiSaver that incoming governments could just pick up and continue to follow? I thought maybe 100 years were a little bit ambitious, but I guess what we want to discuss this afternoon is looking ahead, what should KiwiSaver look like? What are the learnings and what transformation needs to happen? And how can we in this room leave a little bit of a legacy in terms of what that might look like at 2050 and influence the path? First, I would like, hopefully this technology works seamlessly, I would like to ask you all a question, a poll. And that question is going to be delivered through Slido. So if you guys can just pull out your phones, log on to Slido, and in one word, write, what is your biggest hope for KiwiSaver helping to support a dignified retirement for New Zealanders? So biggest hope for KiwiSaver to help support a dignified retirement for New Zealand. Go. And hopefully something will build up on the screen. Quality, scale. There's more than 2 people in the room. Enough, lower state reliance, wealth, continuity, security, mandatory, scale, inclusive without a C, growth, innovation. That is enough. Annuities, longevity, consistency, less withdrawals for hardship, stability, enormous, resilience, security, growth, choice, comfort, flexibility, increasing contributions, choice, state. Nice. A lot of common themes coming around there around stability, scale, consistency. I will just flick through to the next question. And the next question is, what is your biggest concern for KiwiSaver helping to support a dignified retirement for New Zealanders? Biggest concern. Government being the theme of the day. Tinkering. Inequity. Contribution levels. Meddling, tinkering. Thank you. I think that kind of sets the scene quite nicely about what's on everyone's minds today. So this afternoon's session is going to run something like this. I'm going to very briefly set the scene, where we are today, where we've been, and where we're heading to in the future. I've got 5 experts in the panel who I'll then allow to introduce themselves and let them know why it's important that they're here today with us. We will do a Q&A with the panel, and I welcome any questions from the floor through the FSC app, Grand Room 1 to 3. And then we'll have some table talks. So there'll be a little bit of an exercise for each of you to be able to share your thoughts. And then we'll do a wrap up with final thoughts after a couple of you have presented back what you do. So that's kind of going to be the shape of the next 90-ish minutes. So very quickly, if we look back to look forward, mid-80s, number 1 songs. We're kind of balancing between Don't Dream It's Over and Living on a Prayer, which felt quite apt for the session. Back in 2007 when KiwiSaver started, it was Umbrella, which is probably better for the insurance Masterclass. And then the number 1s at the moment are Ordinary and Golden. So maybe that's where we're heading. From a population perspective, when KiwiSaver started, there were 4 million New Zealanders. Today we have 5.3 million New Zealanders, and in 2050 we're going to have more than 6 million New Zealanders. If we look at the 65 plus percentage of New Zealanders, when KiwiSaver started it was 12% of the population was 65 plus. Today it's 17%, and it's predicted in 2050 to be a quarter of New Zealanders will be over 65. If I then look at over 65s working, back in 2007 when KiwiSaver started, there were 13% of 65 plus New Zealanders working. Today, there are 200,000 65 pluses working, and that's 25% of that cohort. And looking ahead, forecasting ahead, they believe that 50% of 65 pluses will be working still in 2025. That's 700,000 New Zealanders. And then another couple of very valuable facts for you if I compare when KiwiSaver started versus where we are today. The price of butter has doubled, and New Zealand Super has doubled. Weekly payments. So that kind of sets a little bit of a scene of where we've come from looking back to look forward. What do New Zealanders say? So recently the FSC did some research with a pool of 1,000 New Zealanders in respect of the recent budgetary changes. Most respondents opposed creating wider bounds for withdrawal for KiwiSaver, acknowledging that the purpose of it was for their first home or saving for their future. Most respondents also supported the May budget KiwiSaver changes, such as extending the contribution regime to 16 and 17-year-olds and increasing the baseline employee and employer contributions to 4% over the next few years. Nonetheless, 2/3 of those surveys did not back the move to slash the member tax credit, while 47% agreed that limiting government contribution to those earning under $180,000 was a good idea. So what do we need, and what can we start thinking about a little bit in this room this afternoon? A long-term strategy would be the appropriate avenue to raise ideas and policy changes to improve KiwiSaver. This would ensure that KiwiSaver continues to serve its purpose while enabling investment into infrastructure, housing and innovation, benefiting both savers and the economy. The current view in Wellington, obviously national, very clearly today, and with their changes to date, have acknowledged that KiwiSaver balances need to grow to support New Zealand Super, that they go fist and glove together. They've put in motion a short-term plan with 2 planned contribution increases, but also signalled there'll be more to come in their upcoming campaign. New Zealand First, Winston, used the floor on the weekend to announce we need to grow up and was brave enough to use the word compulsory. 8%, then 10%. And if anyone knows what's required in retirement years, Winston's probably it. Labour, we've obviously got Chippy and Barbara coming tomorrow, so we will look forward to talking to them about their views. And ACT, well, he's looking overseas for insurance and savings mechanisms to help us sort of plan for our future. So again, I think Nicola Willis kind of said very clearly to us today that she expects that all major political parties will bring a policy, a significant policy around savings and KiwiSaver to the table at the upcoming election. So, without further ado, what I would like to do now is introduce our panel very quickly, allow them to say why are they here today. We'll get into a Q&A and then I'll let you know what we're going to do for our exercise. So, should we start here with you, Rupert?
Kia ora, everyone. My name is Rupert Carlyon, Managing Director at Kōura Wealth. KiwiSaver, for me, is something I'm passionate about. When I remember came out, I was a young analyst at UBS, and our view was that KiwiSaver was the product that was going to transform New Zealand. It was going to solve us from this massive problem of ageing population, but more importantly, it was going to turn New Zealand from a country of spenders into a country of savers. And fundamentally, 18 years later, that vision has not changed. And I think as an industry, we're still trying to make sure it does the same thing. We know we can't afford the superannuation settings as they stand. KiwiSaver is the logical answer. KiwiSaver is often the very first investment that most Kiwis ever have. It's going to be the largest investment that most Kiwis ever have. And so therefore, it's a really critical tool that we also use to build on financial literacy. We need to make sure that our customers are treating it like an investment, understand the implications of what they do. But most importantly, we need to bring it back to its core purpose. It's a retirement tool. It's not here to solve every single problem that New Zealand has. It's here to make sure that people can afford to retire with dignity.
Kōura, I'm Anna Scott, the incoming CEO for Mercer New Zealand. Got 2.5 weeks of gardening leave left. Happy to spend it here with you. But for me, KiwiSaver, I think, is all in the name. And when you break those two parts up, then Kiwi means it's for all Kiwis, but it's meant to be with all Kiwis being involved as well. And I do think that's an area that we can definitely improve on. And the saver part, again, in the name, it is a savings discipline. It's a savings culture. We talk about retirement, but we also know that we have a savings and a cost of living issue as well. I feel like quite often we talk about worrying about the here and now and who can afford, and we'll worry about retirement later, but actually we need to look at both together. You have to be able to run today while you're building tomorrow, and that's not always easy, and there's no silver bullet, but I think we have to look at both parts. So I was pleased today when Nicola Willis talked about the fact that you've got to talk about super and KiwiSaver together, because we do want to use them together in our New Zealand economy and for our communities. And for me, looking forward for KiwiSaver, it comes back to a little bit of that wealth background as well. You have to start early, you have to be consistent, you have to be engaged, and you need to contribute. And we need to make those things as easy and accessible for everyone to make sure that everyone's actually going to be taking part.
Kia ora, my name's Fraser Winneray. I'm not in the program because I'm the gate crasher and was once a chemical engineer and don't have a job pertinent to actually fund management, which makes me the perfect person to speak up to Parliament against KiwiSaver, for KiwiSaver and pension reforms, because I can't just be accused of wanting to make more fees, which is typically the accusation levelled. The reason why I'm here is, thanks Anna Marie, delighted to be here, and is because back in 2020, Christopher Luxon and I, as part of the Prime Minister's Business Advisory Council to the Ardern government, put up a range of advice. And one of them was to do KiwiSaver reform. And that was a pretty simple 2.5 pages. It had to be simple. We were dealing with politicians. And so my vision for this, or our vision there, that was actually a bit narrow in its scope. So now we're trying to pick it up. KiwiSaver, pension reform is coming into play. I think we want to get multi-partisan, multi-decade reform. We actually need to lay out a pathway for someone who's 20 next year all the way through to 2070, and that's going to take some commitment from political parties and some persuasion. That all goes to incentives for individuals, structurally helps New Zealand, and kills 2 birds with 1 stone, or probably more than that, a whole flock of seagulls.
Thanks, Fraser, and thanks. Glad you could make the gate crash.
I'm Susan Edmunds. I'm a money correspondent at RNZ, and I don't know if Oliver's still here, but I have a medieval degree. Mine was history, not French literature, though. But I think I'm here to be the voice of the regular, ordinary person. I can tell you about the angry emails you get if you start talking about changing super. It's really not pleasant. From my perspective, KiwiSaver is obviously a really important part of most people's financial well-being, but I think there is a lot of misunderstanding, or maybe just lack of information. People think this is way too hard, I don't understand it. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to say, no, actually, it's not that hard. You can manage this, is, step through it. So hopefully that's the perspective. I'm just the average person.
Susan.
And lucky last. I'm Tim, and I'm here from Australia. I was around in New Zealand when I was CEO of Mercer New Zealand 20 years ago when KiwiSaver was first introduced, and had the fun of becoming a default KiwiSaver provider at the time. But the reason I'm really here today, I'm now the lead author of the Mercer CFA Global Pension Index, which compares the retirement income system of 48 countries around the world, about to be 52 when we get the October version out. Now, New Zealand is a B grade system. Not that numbers are important, but as an actuary, I love numbers. So 14th out of 48 on the index. And why is that? the integrity is actually pretty good. It's right up there in how things are governed, reported, the data. Sustainability, a little bit less so. The ageing population we heard about. There are many countries in the world which are increasing the retirement age because of affordability. In France, great retirement system, but do you think the money is going to be there where they're not able to change the age and there's strikes? But the biggest one where New Zealand falls behind is the adequacy. New Zealand Super ranks really well, but KiwiSaver is a savings scheme, not a retirement income system. And as a consequence, there isn't the money flowing through to retirement phase, nor does KiwiSaver actually help people spend that money. So that's why I'm here today, to try and challenge from overseas. I won't know the rules and everything else, but hopefully I can give international challenge.
Thank you. I kind of think it would be quite good after David Seymour's presentation to have some Franco-Germans join us too, given that's where he's looking. But the seats are full. So thank you very much. I'm very privileged to be able to talk with you all this afternoon about your insights. And maybe I'll just kick off with you, Fraser. And the reason actually Fraser got the last minute call up was that Fraser did present, recently posted on LinkedIn, his Prime Minister's Business Advisory Council recommendations that he made back in 2020 around KiwiSaver. And he presented those to us at the CEO Forum. And I thought, you know what? This is actually really aligned to some of the work that we've been doing, some of the research we've got from New Zealanders. And what a great ally to have as we head into kind of trying to help to influence the right changes to make sure New Zealanders have a dignified retirement. On all of your tables actually is a copy of that 2020 paper, so we'll be digging into a little bit of that during our workshop. But the first question is, you had a crack at this, Fraser. What happened?
Yeah.
They didn't listen.
That's why we're here. Because we're going to have another crack at it. No, it's amazing the industrial-sized earplugs on multiple policy points that all politicians get when they come into power. And we are going to have a real crack, not at government, but at Parliament on this one. So the first comment when I said it's quite inequitable the way KiwiSaver works, because I'm taking 3% of my my income from the employer when I was the chief executive of Mercury, and the person I might be sitting next to one day in an open plan office is in the call centre and they couldn't sacrifice 3 to get 3. The cost of capital is over 100%. I thought it was terrible. I said, well, to HR, why don't they pay half and we'll pay 3? Can't do that. And so it started off from a position of inequity, and then we started digging in and thought we really need to stretch this out. And rather than make little tweaks to it and call it KiwiSaver 1.1, really what we're at now is we need to do KiwiSaver 2.0. So that's 5.5 years old. I've learnt things like Beveridgean versus Bismarckian and other key policy settings. But the door's been opened, as you said, Anna Marie. We need to push Parliament to do the right thing for the long term and get this thing in play. And that's why I want us to be able to work out what's the compelling straw man for 2026. We've got to drag that election window and this topic into the election window, which it seems to be doing. And really put all political parties in the position of, well, if it's not this, what is it? If it's not now, when is it? When is it? And if it's not you guys, a whole of Parliament, then who can do this? So that's we didn't make much progress last time, but really looking forward to getting all the best ideas out of everyone before, after this conference, so we can help design the best what.
Thank you, Fraser. I might go to the left and the right wing here with Tim and Rupert and throw out to you, what kind of future regulation changes do you think, and probably from an international perspective first, might be necessary to enhance our KiwiSaver's robustness?
Hey, it's actually really interesting because with KiwiSaver, we're trying to do many things. It's a savings scheme for first home buyers, as I look at this from overseas. It's got so much early access provision, and these are things which are very valuable to individuals. So we have a problem in that lots of the money will be spent or even not contributed before people get to a retirement phase. I'm saying phase, not age anymore, because as we heard, people continue working on this. So in that environment, we need to think about a way, how do I incentivize people to save? How do I still give access? And if KiwiSaver is meant to be more than a retirement income system, is that when you increase the contributions? Maybe they go into a separate pot, like Singapore, which we heard earlier. And there are different things you can do. If the aim is to be for your first home, for early access when things are tough, and retirement income, then the contribution level doesn't look enough. But if the aim is retirement income, it probably is enough. And I'll just give you the biggest secret in Australia is everyone thinks that we contribute 12%, or our employer does, out of our wage. That's just enough never to qualify for the government pension. So what you're doing is you're self-funding the retirement, and Australia has the cheapest age pension of any OECD country, and it's going to go backwards instead of forwards. 2.4% of GDP, and like healthcare is very different, but the actual bit on age pension, it's going to cost diddly squat.
How much is a block of butter in Australia?
What's that, sorry?
How much is a block of butter in Australia?
That's what they ask politicians, and they always get the wrong answer and they never get elected, so I'm going to pass on that one. But it's probably $7.
I think everyone in this room, we're probably in agreement. Well, the panacea is the Australian system, right? It's compulsion and increasing contribution rates to that 12 to 14%, which is where we know it needs to be to allow it to be self-sustaining. The problem is, in my view, we can't have compulsion without an incentive. And at the moment, there is almost no incentive for individuals to have that money locked up until they're 65. And this is the perennial challenge for our governments. What the Australians have done to pay for it is a simple means testing on superannuation in Australia. That's how they've got a model which is consistent at 4.5% of GDP when you combine the super payments plus the incentives. And that's a model that we need to go. I don't think we can do the nice to hear this morning talked about the fist and glove together of superannuation and KiwiSaver. We can't afford to provide incentives unless we move pretty quickly to make changes to superannuation. The one big thing, though, that would be the easiest change of all, which would make a humongous difference, is total remuneration policies. That just has to go. That is probably the biggest driver of inequity of all in KiwiSaver. 40 to 45% of all employees are now have this kind of in their contracts. It actually means, for most people, particularly now that we're down to $260 of government contribution, the incentive is close to nil. So if there was one thing that could be done tomorrow without much political will needed, my suggestion is that.
Susan, what do your readers say and balk at in terms of regulatory change?
I think in general they don't like change at all. I think anytime we start changing the rules, there's this thing that always comes up. Is the government going to take my money? Is it going to be there when I'm 65? And I think anytime we change the rules, that comes back up again, that the government might change it and I might not have access that I'm expecting. So I think if we could stop making little changes, then that would be really helpful.
And Anna, your insights around regulation?
That builds into that transparency and trust. And I think that we often, as KiwiSaver providers, get those questions about, well, you've got my money and I want it. And I think that that's that confusion or misunderstanding between, is it a savings plan or a retirement plan? Because when you have savings, then we talk about rainy day savings and savings for a holiday and a purpose, etc. And although this is for savings for retirement, savings means I can kind of access it when I want to. So it is, people really feel that personal part about it's my money and it's my money now versus the lock away for retirement and this is a section that's in a bucket. And I think when Tim talked about that, some of those ways of delineating what purposes and when you can access it may well be helpful in trying to get that point across, but also for people to feel that they can trust when it is there and it's a little more transparent for them for the purpose as well.
Thanks, Anna. Maybe if we just move a little bit to the demographic and ethnicity shifts that we're seeing in New Zealand. I obviously touched on a lot of the age transition that we're going to see. Europeans are obviously going to continue to have a larger share of those aged 65 plus, but those minority ethnic groups will be growing quickly into the future too. So maybe we'll start with you, Susan. Considering, I guess, the projected demographic change, what unique financial needs and cultural considerations do we need to consider for those to engage with KiwiSaver?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think in terms of the ageing population, I think this point was made earlier, that at the moment we give a lot of thought to putting the money into KiwiSaver, but we don't help people a lot with bringing it out again. And it would be good if there was a bit more support, I think. Once people have a balance that's worth eking out over retirement, that we do something about that. In terms of the makeup of society changing, I was thinking a bit about people who come into New Zealand maybe with a mindset of being self-employed. At the moment, there's really nothing in KiwiSaver to help self-employed people, is there? And so that's a gap that I think that we could potentially look at moving some levers around. And if there was, I don't know, there are many different ways you could incentivise KiwiSaver, but if we had some tax incentives maybe for self-employed, that might be a way to help.
Okay, and on the diversity, increased diversity impact, what type of financial products and communication strategies do we need, Anna?
I think at our heart we're all human and we all like to have control to some various degree, and we all like to have choice. And I think when we look at how that works with age or demographic or cultural shifts, then those things are still important. So access, how do we do it? Knowing that you've got to work on a spectrum from people who want to do it themselves for those that want assistance and advice. So that accessibility needs to be there. The product offering with different flexibility for times in life, different values that people have around where they might want to invest or what they think is appropriate, but also to where they might live as they get older. So if they're a single person, they're living within a wider community group. So knowing how those people will want to be able to access and what products work for them. And then largely the communication styles. It's increasingly important. It comes back to that transparency and trust. It comes to the languages that you want to use and the language within a language, what channels you're offering to access people and to reach them on, and that also comes into where are they going to see you and trust you. We say there's a lot of information about KiwiSaver, and there is, but I think it's sometimes overwhelming about which information provider are you taking that info from and who do you trust, and then you add advisors on top, and it's a very busy, noisy space.
It sounds like David Seymour's getting none. I think I might just touch on something you talked about, Susan. We do a great job of getting people into KiwiSaver, but we don't do a great job when they hit retirement and say, well, here you go. This is what you've saved for. So maybe, Rupert, do you want to kick off and talk a little bit about decumulation and how we kind of manage that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think you said it really well. As providers, I think most of our focus goes into how do we win customers. Mm-hmm. I mean, KiwiSaver marketing spend, for example, over the last 3 or 4 years has probably quadrupled where it was, which is an interesting stat around where our industry is going. We're spending a lot of time focusing on getting them in the door. We're doing all right at probably when they're in there, but kind of nowhere near enough on the education. It's a cultural, I think there's 2 things. There's a cultural shift. So 18 years old, the balance is at an average balance of $45,000 or $40,000, sorry. We're not quite, I think, probably there where people are seeing that as that long-term annuity. As our balances grow, hopefully that changes. But I think the conversations that we as providers are having with our customers up front, it needs to change, even down to some of the life stages products that we see in the market. Making sure that we don't stop anything at 65. Up front, all of the communications from our PDSs to when we join them up need to be talking about, we're setting you up through to 95, not through to 65. And I think it's probably us at the provider side that really need to drive that, change those comms. We don't have the annuity products yet here in New Zealand. I think until we see tax changes, that's not going to happen because people don't want to be double taxed on the annuity out of those income products. And I'll be honest, with the KiwiSaver providers that we have at the moment, it's going to be really hard to see the annuity. So the only real path that we've got is education, and that needs to start up front.
I'll pass over to you in a minute, Tim, but there was a question from the floor that feeds quite nicely into what Rupert said, and that was we talk about average KiwiSaver balances. And Rupert just touched on that being $40,000. The question was, should we be reporting and following the average balance at age 65, which currently is $70,000. So on that, I might pass over to you, Tim, because you have some views.
This is really interesting. In the Australian environment, this is the number one thing being raised by the regulators. We've got the world's best accumulation system. We're the first into defined contribution big time. We are not helping anybody when it comes to retirement phase. So there is a covenant introduced where there's an obligation on trustees to help their members look at three things which don't work well together. One is maximise income. One is the risks involved to manage the risks. And the third one is flexible access. You can see, depending on individual preferences, that's a different answer. So we've got this system where you get to age 67, and in that world, you can get there without making any decisions at all. Default contributions, mandatory. It grows, you get the communication. But once you get to retirement phase, all of a sudden, you've got to make decisions. And people are not used to making decisions. And the decisions in front of people are very personal, very different. The government's putting that on the trustees to give the answer, yet the trustee does not know whether the individual qualifies for age pension, because that depends on house and partner status. They don't know health. They don't know whether you have frugal expenditure. They don't know all these things, a risk appetite of the individual. So it's very difficult, but this is the conundrum everyone is facing into. And I do think it will mean a combination of a lot more focus on retirement income, lifetime income streams, although people are not very popular even in Australia with the tax incentive. I think that will grow. People will be much more aware of what is happening. But the big word I'm hearing is anxiety. And how can the super providers help with that help, guidance and advice?
Can I just, I mean, Tim, you used a really interesting set of words. You used the word decisions about 6 times. And I think that's one of the big things that we don't do. By simplifying it so much, we're kind of KiwiSaver. It is the largest investment most people are ever going to take. They need to make the right decisions around contribution rates. They need to make the right decisions on fund types. And it all falls into the same bucket. And I think it comes back to us as providers to go, well, how do we help our clients make those decisions early? Because the more we can get them thinking about it as the largest investment they're ever going to have, that's going to solve some of those problems. It's a really interesting word, the decisions part.
Yeah, and feedback from the floor, thanks Helen, around decumulation at 65. You know, particularly if a lot of 65-year-olds are putting into fixed interest is where it's going to go for their income. People are living now to 85, 90, so they're going to need some sort of good lick of growth for longer than people think. So keep that feedback and questions coming through. Thank you. I'll keep an eye on them. Fraser, you touched on inequity when you were sitting in your shiny little office at Mercury. And what's that? Oh, sorry, big office, shiny big office at Mercury. But in your paper, you tried to address some of the inequity that exists in KiwiSaver. So what were some of the solutions that you had suggested in your 2030 paper? And do they still hold true?
Yeah, no, I didn't have an office. It was a nice office in Newmarket, but that I didn't actually have one. There's a poor design. The original paper, and I talked about that original construct of the inequity of poorer people when I did this. So then I got the survey done and it was like, oh my goodness, there's quite a few people that aren't getting this, and it wasn't equitable. And I think inequity, it's the right moral thing to address, but it's also critical for getting multi-partisan, multi-decade support for this, because if this just exacerbates inequities, then it certainly won't get that support. So what I was looking to do on the floor, everyone should be getting their employer 3%. I said, just cap it. And I said to the Prime Minister Ardern, I said, I don't have a savings problem. My 3% of whatever I was earning is a lot. And I'm sure Michael Cullen didn't introduce it because we all know that percentage-based increases are regressive, right? Because you're working off bigger or smaller bases. And she said at that point I was in danger of becoming a socialist. But now it's a much broader discussion to have on equity, which is enrolment ages, making sure that top-ups or incentives or tax incentives aren't regressive. And I think employment gaps, because we all know when you take a gap on the old compounding magic, it really starts to extrapolate out later on, particularly for those that are primary caregiver. But I would say one last thing on inequity is where the KiwiSaver 2.0 can really help, and there's a panel session on it tomorrow, and you've heard people talk about this, is where it turns into well-governed capital expenditure rather than consumption, i.e. a better savings rate that leads to better asset allocation or recycling out of local and central government, better infrastructure, and then that benefits everyone. And because infrastructure expenditure is one of the most progressive things you can do for poor people. So I think there's multiple legs to it, but directly, yes, we need to address it, otherwise this reform isn't going to happen.
Thanks, Fraser. And I think when Fraser was talking about compounding gap, he was actually starting to lead into a conversation around gender gaps. And KiwiSaver being 25% lower for women than men. So nice question from the floor on that. To segue to you, Anna. What about the significant gender retirement gap? Changes to the system need to be responsive to the structural settings that see women, Maori and minoritised groups earn less over their lifetimes. What are the solutions?
So I think one of those solutions is the fact that we decouple the employer and the employee contributions so that people can afford to when they can and they're able to. But I think that captures some self-employed, and we also know that there's vast tracts of our communities who are spending time caring for other people in their family and community, which is unpaid work, yet that is still adding huge value. So I think we do need to find a way that there is an overarching way for employers to contribute, no matter whether someone's on maternity leave or they've taken a health break or they are just not able to make their own employee contribution, and that factor should sit through with employers, the decoupling of that. But also if you're self-employed, you don't want to pay yourself and the employer side, so how can you make that slightly more affordable? Because at the end of the day, contributing something into your KiwiSaver is better than nothing, and we have far too many people on the nothing side.
Thanks. Anyone else want to throw in any?
There's actually quite a cool thing in Australia where streaming of your superannuation. So
Streaming.
So you can effectively, if you've got a couple, so if one of the parents stops working around parenthood, the working partner can actually push part of their superannuation into the other. So it's coming to my view of where tax should be sitting. It's treating you like a true household rather than that separation of kind of husband and wife. But there are some quite simple things like that we can do that will do a big job to kind of normalise balances.
Can I put one forward as well?
So polite, this panel.
Thank you very
You
much.
may.
The percentage contribution compounds the problem that people on lower pay get lower retirement savings. Perhaps the only way to deal to that is a fixed dollar contribution, perhaps on top. Remember when KiwiSaver started, there was the $1,000 government contribution. That's why I joined, straight off at that stage. You want free money, you want an incentive. So just the thought, maybe because it's a percentage of pay, is there a minimum amount that is paid? Obviously, affordability is an issue, but that's something you have to deal to, or you compound the problem.
But that was the government contribution. That was the reasoning why it was $1,042 a year.
Yeah.
For exactly that reason.
Exactly. It was pretty good design.
Thanks. Some really good ideas coming from the floor, which hold some of those for the session that you're going to have shortly. Just one final one, I think, around that kind of touches on the inequity. What reforms would you recommend need to happen to ensure there's equity after a relationship split? We obviously have growing women's homelessness issues after divorce. Is that something you've picked up on, Susan?
Yes, this issue of KiwiSaver as relationship property is something I think a lot of people aren't even aware of. So I think more education about that would be quite helpful. But yes, it is a major problem. I think we see, I think even this morning the FMA put out its report about KiwiSaver and highlighted that people who weren't contributing were potentially getting into a big gulf between those who were getting ahead and those who weren't. And it was something like 30% of people in working age weren't contributing at all, which I thought was really high. But yeah, I think that whatever we can do to help women both earn more and not be left behind if they take time out of the workforce has to be a priority, because we do see this big difference in people coming out of relationships.
Thanks, Susan. I don't think any session at this year's FSC conference would probably pass unless we talked about AI, financial literacy and tech engagement. So we might just quickly touch on those. So Rupert, what digital tools and platforms do you think are going to be essential for engaging future KiwiSaver members? And you live in the digital world.
I mean, it's AI, right? And it's an interesting debate that we're having at the moment internally at Kōura is how much and how far can you go? Some interesting comments before around the hyper-personalisation that people expect, down to the fact that we're now being asked by how can we help clients in Chinese and Mandarin, how can we help in foreign languages. The truth is, I think AI is going to provide a lot of that support and a lot of that help. We can give people much clearer answers and much more personalised kind of answers to what they need, providing the answers on decumulation, contribution rates, all of those kind of things, I think make that a whole lot easier. The challenge that we will have as an industry is saying, cool, we can now give them 10 really great personalised emails a year to help them do it. But I guarantee every other service provider is going to do the same. So how do we actually cut through and get them to care and listen? And I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, and Anna, maybe just building on that, where do we draw, there's a question from the floor, where do we draw the line with providers taking the lead of members' decisions and actually members taking ownership of their own decisions?
And I think this comes into the collective opportunity, and some of it is access and communication style, and I think AI can really help with that. So in your own time, in your own language, in your own channel, you can get the information that you need. So that's about just broad accessibility. But I also think that there's a bit here that we can really collectively use around tools and trust, because we all build our own calculators and tools, right? Every person's website has one, and I think that adds to the confusion sometimes. If we actually collectively had a toolkit, and Sorted's got some really good ones on their website, then I think that helps build trust that you know that your decumulator tool or your accumulator or price of living and cost of retirement is coming from the same place, then actually those are all just digital standards that we should have. On top of that, you may well have an affinity with a brand, a particular product and service offering, or a person, because I think money is an emotional thing, and there's an aspect of human relationship that is always going to be needed for people when they're planning, because it's a holistic view of their retirement, their hopes and dreams and plans. I don't think we're yet at that time where we're all going to trust the computer and AI to do that for us. So I think that human connection is important, but we can really do something about building transparency and trust by common, collective, uniform tools that provide calculators and answers, and then it's a human relationship on top.
And maybe I'll throw over to the sofa over there on my left, in terms of how you think we can use technology to support.
Right, I'll go first then,
Sure.
if that's okay, Susan. I'm going to come from the Australian environment, very different from here. At the morning session, we heard of the cost of personal financial advice in Australia because the legislation, the Corps Act, has got out of hand, and the regulator ASIC, the way it enforces it, is very tricky. Let's put that, it's a public record, so it's tricky on this. As a consequence, vast majority of Australians cannot afford personal financial advice. So the super funds, the providers, can step in with AI and provide the guidance. So it's not information, it's not personal tailored advice, but it's a prompt, it's a nudge, it's guidance to help you with this. When that happens, because of course individuals have their own preferences, which you don't know, so you can't push, it helps people think about people like me. And AI, I think, is a fantastic way to bring the affordability down. And in fact, what I think will happen in Australia, that will be provided for free as part of the superannuation offering to everybody, provided it falls through certain reg hoops. So that is what I see it can do. It can help everybody.
I guess my average person perspective is that I have had people email me to say, is ChatGPT a reliable retirement advisor? And I have to say, oh, you might want to test its, its conclusions. But I guess in line with what Anna says, I think there is a lot of variety in what the providers are offering. And if you go to look at one, it's quite different from the other one. And even when I use something like Sorted in a story, a provider will say, oh, their assumptions are quite low because the FMA tells them they have to be. So can you make it a bit higher? And so it gets really confusing. And I think I agree. It would be good if we could have some uniformity there.
I thought we did have uniformity. I thought we all had our assumptions we were meant to use and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, you all tell me that, and then you say, well, no, it's a bit conservative, though. Well, that's what...
Here's my caveat.
And Fraser, do you have technology? Obviously wasn't around when you wrote your first paper, so...
No, I just, listening to today's discussion, which is great, I think the decumulation piece is where it's going to, which is clearly an issue, and Aussies are a few years ahead of us since the 92 Aussie Accord and Guarantee, that I think that's going to be very important for helping people navigate that. But of course, it's like when you're getting audits on a company's set of accounts, the auditor and the board of directors can't rely on AI because it's difficult to sue or put in jail. So there still has to be steps that are done through meeting the regulatory hurdles. But I agree, it'll be a great augmentation to bring the cost down. And I think I hadn't really turned my mind to decumulation, but it's a biggie, really tricky.
I've received a few technical questions around Australian super, which I probably won't pick up on today, and also a comment around the streaming effectively of splitting contributions into households, which I think are really valuable ideas to throw out. So our speaking time has gone red, and so what I might do now is just introduce our activity. So this is our interactive activity among your tables. So each of your tables are the Parliamentary Business Advisory Council. So remember that Chris Luxon and Fraser Winneray sat on the Prime Minister's Business Advisory Council. But what we'd like to do is to present to Parliament a paper entitled KiwiSaver 2.0, looking ahead to 2050. So the Finance Minister spoke with our Regulatory Affairs FSC member today and said, actually, I'd love to hear what the industry says in terms of how we, as an industry, and actually as average New Zealanders, want the Parliament of the future to think about KiwiSaver. So we said, that's great, we're going to do that this afternoon and we're going to present this back to you. So within your tables, you need to consider what the system should look like. Within your Parliamentary Business Advisory Council brief, you need to say what are 3 things on your wish list that you would like the Parliament to take forward, and this is bipartisan, for future KiwiSaver schemes to be run with. The 3 things that Nicola Willis touched on were security and retirement for retirees, fiscal sustainability, and replicating what we know works overseas. So this is on the promise of substantive policy on KiwiSaver and savings coming up into the next upcoming campaigns for all parties. Obviously, we'll be meeting with all parties. Fraser has also got his army and is heading down to Wellington with a new updated paper in the coming months. He doesn't know it, but he is. So please, before we jump into that session, I'd like one further thought from everyone on the panel to provoke your thinking. We're then going to spend about 20 minutes in your tables writing your wish list of 3 items to the Parliament for your Business Advisory Council letter. And there's flip charts, there's Fraser's and team's effort from 2019-2020, and there's some demographic slides on your tables to give you a little bit of thought. So start with you, Tim.
Okay, I'm going to go a different way. How could we get the assets in KiwiSaver above $1 trillion? In Australia, it's 4.1 trillion at present, which I hear New Zealand's like 120 billion. That's a step change. So what are the incentives that would allow extra assets, and what good would that do for the nation?
I think for me, the biggest question on my mind at the moment is how do we stop KiwiSaver making rich people richer and poor people further left behind?
My point would be is how you integrate the KiwiSaver changes you want to put forward with changes to the pension over time, so that it's an integrated package all the way through how a 20-year-old would view it to next year at election, and also someone who's born next year. What is their journey going to be?
Mine would be thinking about if this ideas that we want to take, and this is part of FSC's plan to heading into election, is to get the right thing on every political party's manifesto, then don't focus so much on the how you want them to do that, but we need to bring the what and we've had this discussion earlier today. So the three things need to be big outcome, what you want to achieve, how each party figures out how to do that, and sustainability and all the rest, that's their job. But we need to be really collective and uniform on actually what it is we want them to achieve.
At the risk of massively oversimplifying it, I guess my big question is, why can't we just copy Australia? It works. It's world leading. And they're sustainable from a fiscal position. Why can't we just do that?
Just like their pavlova.
Exactly.
All right, so you've heard it here. How do we summarise on one flip chart how we can be more like Australia, make our scheme $1 trillion, ensure it's equitable, integrate it with New Zealand super, and what three things do you need to do? And then let's leave the how to the politicians. So you got 20 minutes. We'll be wandering around. Get yourself a scribe. A few tables will be presenting back to the room. And thank you in advance for your great ideas. As promised, we kind of wandered around the room and found some great discussions going on at tables. So we're going to ask a number of tables just to stand up and share some of their top three priorities and insights and discussions they had at that table. So the first table we're going to go with is your table there, Murray. You've got 1 minute.
There's plenty here.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the nomination in the corner. We didn't solve anything, but we had a good discussion. But we thought the number one thing is contributions, because that's where it all starts and ends, really. Mucking around at 3+3, great that we're moving to 4+4. We thought 5+5 is a good target, because ultimately it's contributions. We need it to be meaningful for the individuals, and average balances right now are just not meaningful enough. And we need it to be meaningful for the system to gain scale, because then that gives options for future governments around the whole pension system. And so we talked about a 20 or a 30-year vision where we could actually start having conversations early around reducing or means testing the pension, because we can offset that with private savings and increasing the age. So that gives options if we've got a good KiwiSaver system. And then the other one was financial literacy, because the big questions around contributions is people aren't contributing enough because they don't know how much they need. We need to educate people on why it's a good idea to contribute more of your income, and also how do I make it last, so bringing in the decumulation discussion. So how much do I need, and then once I've got that goal in mind and I've achieved the goal, how do I make sure this money lasts me until I leave this earth?
Thanks, Murray. Contributions and financial literacy. Rupert, who is your table of choice?
Well, down here there was quite a good conversation around first homes and how that problem might be solved.
Hi, everyone. In terms of first homes, because I'm told we can't remove it, we have to allow first home withdrawals. I'm proposing, I have a little bit of support, but not much from the rest of the team, but I'm proposing, what if we have buckets, right? So if you've got a compulsory contribution, you've got a minimum employer contribution, those go into your retirement bucket, but anything that you contribute on top of that could go into a first home bucket, or not just a first home bucket, but an accessible bucket. But that would need to be tied in with having tax-deductible contributions as well. So obviously with the tax deductibility, you've got the incentive to then increase your employee contributions to 10% because, woohoo, I get to pay less tax because of it. So potentially having those two buckets, but together with the pre-tax contributions, decoupling the employee and the employer contributions, very important. Gradually implementing means testing, increasing retirement age. And the employer contribution being subject to a minimum dollar amount. Tied to minimum wage or something like that, yeah.
Thank you. Very comprehensive. Anna. Is that purple shirt over in the corner? Right, purple shirt's getting ready to stand up. Here we go.
Okay, thanks, David and team. Shades of collusion with Murray's table, probably. Similar themes, very much. Our number one was investing in proper financial literacy for children all right through, and not just how to read a bank statement, but actually proper strategizing. How can our children actually work out how they're going to grow their wealth, which is both budget planning and strategizing for developing, but starting it early. So very supportive of the current, I guess, curriculum initiative to introduce financial literacy, whether that's sufficient or not, but that needs to be more ingrained in our whole society. The other one, which I is some form of incentivization or enhancement of the strategies for decumulation. That the concern is we put the effort into growing the pie at 65, but there is nothing that the government provides at the end, or the system provides once you get there. How are we going to stop people blowing that? What are the strategies for paying down once you've got, given your life expectancy once you hit 65? The increase in contribution rate, what we thought or looked more at was winding back to the one-for-one contribution, to the Crown contribution, to match contributions, to just add that incentive for people to continue contributing, because that for us is it's both a drop on people's willingness, enthusiasm to contribute. If you're actually getting one-for-one, it increases equality for people up to that cap, because, you know, at $1,000 contribution for somebody who's on a minimum wage is a much bigger proportion of their savings compared to somebody who's already got 100k, 200k, or whatever, they're contributing at 3%. So I think that will enhance equality and will just enhance that saving strategy for people. Whether or not you make it compulsory or not, that will make a big difference.
Thanks, David.
That is our story.
Thank you, David. Fraser, you were working closely with the team to shape your views. Harry's table.
And it was all range of good talks. So.
I think, or at least my view is maybe a bit more negative than some of the other ones. So we did talk about incentivizing contributions, but then the question becomes, how does the government pay for that? An obvious one is by means testing super, but if we can't even politically increase the age by a couple of years, I'm not sure how politically we could ever means test super. I also think, and we didn't actually get to discuss this, I think we've talked about, you know, when KiwiSaver balances get big enough, then a decumulation market will just materialise, but from what I hear, that doesn't seem to have happened in Australia. So I think it could be worth having some sort of sensible defaults for the decumulation phase, something that people have to opt out of rather than opting into, so that the people who are not willing to make decisions can keep not making decisions but still have a reasonable outcome, but can still decide to opt out of that if they've got a better use for the money rather than a regular income. And we also briefly discussed, if we were going to get rid of total REM, we would probably have to at the same time remove the requirement that the employee is contributing for the employer to have to contribute. Otherwise you'd have people on lower incomes who can't afford to make the employee contribution, and without total REM they would just miss out on the employer. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Susan, did you have a table of choice?
I had to go and talk to the FMA, which is a lot less worrying for me than it is for some of you. But if Christine from DebtFix is here, she has some good ideas about financial hardship.
Perfect.
Thank you, Susan. I was with this table here, and it comes as no surprise to people who know me that I got them to put Independent Hardship Hub down on our sheet. Just then we can reduce the number of hardship withdrawals, but also with financial literacy, involve financial mentoring, making sure that they're looking at all options that would help ease their hardship. So that's where that's why I put independent hardship on. But as I am a team player as well, We also had over here tax settings, so incentives and others, to try and encourage increased contribution to members, and also tax incentives for employers and businesses to encourage that too. And also, well, we did have total REM on here, but also decoupling. So even if the employee can't afford to pay, again, this comes under hardship, that the employer actually continues to contribute so that we're not making the poor poorer, they're still getting something in their super, in their KiwiSaver, which I do think we should change the name of as well, by the way. Yeah. Have I covered everything? Yeah? Cool.
Thanks,
Thank
Christine
you.
and team.
Thank you.
Oh, Christine, there's a question. Actually, we're doing reverse questions now. So there's a question from the panel. What would you like to change the name to?
Well, I said Kiwi Super, but Jane Wrightson doesn't want it to say Kiwi Super, so we have to come up with a new name. So I thought, yeah, and Super Kiwi did come up, but Kiwi Super Saver, I don't know, it's just KiwiSaver. The public see it as a savings account, and this has come out in this session today, and it's my money, it's my savings account, I want it out, just give it to me. I know at DebtFix we get abuse every single day on that, because they're seeing it as a savings account, not a retirement savings account. So
thanks. We'll engage a marketing company.
Yeah, absolutely. You can. I'm a charity.
Thank you. And one final table from you, Tim.
All right, I only spoke to one, and that's in the middle over there. So, guys, right behind Bobby Schoonroad's table.
Thanks, Tim. Everyone pretty much covered everything. So for us, the biggies were the decouple employee and employer contributions, but we had lots of things in the contribution space. So maybe the system is too simple, and I know it works for all of us and the employees, but perhaps that just needs to be a little bit more complexity. We talked about age discrimination. The kids under 16 are getting employer contributions, or even perhaps auto-enrolling kids in KiwiSaver when they get their tax number. And likewise for 65 plus, they should continue to get the contributions as well. We talked about reviewing tax settings, and we talked about means testing. I think we do have to talk about it as an industry. And everyone else covered quite a bit. So yeah, that was us.
Thank you, Tatiana. So that wraps up the workshop part. Thank you very much for your contribution. I wrote down a total of 16 ideas across all of the tables. There are a number repeated. Our commitment to you is that we will look at these ideas, we will pull together a summary, and we will ensure that is progressed and hits the tables in Wellington. Fraser also will be taking a different route down there, and we'll be looking at some of this in terms of rewriting the paper and calling it KiwiSaver 2.0. So thank you on behalf of everyone up here and on the FSC. I think very clearly the opportunity is now. The politicians have put it out there in terms of this is what we're looking at. Whilst the ideas that we're talking about today are not new ideas, they are evolving, and they are well backed up with data and information that helps us head in the right direction and put the right story in front of the team down south. Some other notes I made from the session were we're talking about a savings system. We need to make sure we've got a focus on retirement system and what sits next to it. Incentives are key to influence behaviours. It can't be self-fulfilling, and we have to put ourselves in the shoes of New Zealanders to ensure that we're heading towards the goal, which is a dignified retirement. Total REM is a challenge to allow some of these settings changes to really play their best. New Zealanders are averse to change, so let's make sure we get it right, map out a plan and allow people to execute on that plan. We've been very good about helping people get into KiwiSaver. Let's make sure we allow them to make the best use of that for its purpose by helping through the accumulation phase. And let's consider household assets as opposed to individual assets when we're talking about KiwiSaver. We have 2 minutes left before Lloyd's shouting us all drinks outside. So I'm just going to go quickly through the panel. 2 questions, compulsory, yes or no, and contribution level. So for 2050.
All right, compulsory partially. Can I say that?
Politician.
Yeah. Contributions, no.
Actually, the level of contributions.
The level of contribution, if NZ Super is compulsory, not means tested, no. But if it's means tested, yes.
But what is that level of contribution? Sorry, I wasn't clear. A number between
All right.
0 and 20.
8.
Thank you.
I would say yes to compulsion as long as we move some of the other levers so that the people who would struggle to afford it can still afford it. And I would say let's aim for 6 plus 6.
Yeah, it does need to be compulsory. We'll have moments we'll fail the marshmallow test, and so we need to keep pushing on for our retirements. And I think the number, when it's compulsory, it's an aggregate number, and that needs to be north of 10 because that's what the actuarial analysis will tell you to enjoy real conditions in your retirement.
Anna?
I'm a yes to compulsion, and I'd like to see that as you've said around other parameters. So I would like that to be compulsory from actually you're auto-enrolled at a young age, so that it truly becomes something that everyone has to care about, and kids do too. And then the level, I think it needs to be a minimum of 10.
Compulsion, yes, but only with incentives. I don't think it's fair to ask people to lock up their money till 65 without a reward on the other side. The number, I'd probably go higher than everyone else. OECD average is 15% in terms of pension contribution. We're allowing people to take it out for their first home. So I think it probably needs to be north of 12, somewhere in that 12 to 14 range.
Thank you, panel. So it looks like Winston's got another 4 voters, and Tim can't vote, so he's okay. So thank you very much for your insights. I hope you enjoyed this afternoon's masterclass. Thanks again for attending. Drinks are on outside in 23 seconds, so enjoy the drinks.